Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another video about how good are the factions with the new Arcs of Omen points, data slates, missions, etc. So today's video will actually be going over Tyranid. So this will be our first Tyranid-centric video on the channel, and I'm very excited about it. For those of you that do not know, Kit, who will be guiding a lot of today's discussion, is actually one of the top-rated Tyranid players in the US. You're currently, I believe, like second place just behind John Lennon for US-based Tyranid
Second in
players.
US. Yep.
And you're top five at the moment for Tyranid in the world.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Their UK events have a lot of points.
yeah. So he definitely has some presence and some pull with the Tyranid community, and we were talking a little bit about their changes. So I said, why don't we throw this into another tier maker and just see how they're feeling after the points changes. And I'm going to preface this just a little bit with Tyranids are definitely getting a bit of a nerf hammer with
They
the
are.
new book. So with that, I'm going to pass the reins over to you, Kit. Guide me through a little bit about these changes. Let's talk Tyranids.
Yeah. First up, I want to say that I've seen a lot of doom and gloom posting about Tyranids. I think that they are some people saying like, "Oh, this army is completely unplayable now." I don't think that's true. I think that Tyranids are getting worse, and I think they're going to be harder to play, and the builds are going to change for sure. But I think they are far from unplayable. So, starting out, let's go ahead and get right into it. First guy, the Winged Hive Tyrants. So this one got kind of a double whammy. You're looking at a 20-point increase, I believe it was. But the big nerf to it is the overrun getting changed to be core only.
Hmm.
That nerfs the Flyrant heavily. So for those who don't know, one of the core strategies with the Flying Hive Tyrant for competitive play was putting a dual bone sword with the Reaper of Obliterax on, Lash Whip and Bone Sword with Reaper of Obliterax. Then that would be sent out, fly extremely far, advance with, and then use Onslaught to advance and charge, kill a unit because the Reaper of Obliterax gave it a huge damage boost, and then it would use Overrun, which is a stratagem that allows it to make a normal move at the end of the fight phase if it charged that turn, to then fly back into the Tyranid lines and be back in the safety of something like Tyrant Guard, which protected it from being shot in return. And this could be done multiple times and allowed you to just delete units and then run back and get a ton of value out of the Flying Hive Tyrant. That no longer works. And that's a big problem for the Flying Hive Tyrant because now you're looking at 245 points for the good loadout, with the previous good loadout with Adrenal Glands and a Lash Whip and Bone Sword, which is something that is just too expensive to be taken realistically with how fragile it is and the fact it has to be your Warlord, so you'll lose imperatives if it dies. If we
So
were. Mhm.
my kind of just question from the sidelines here is I've played against a lot of Tyranids, and I've always felt like that was so key to their strategy was having the Flyrant be able to kind of dive bomb out and essentially it doesn't have to trade for the unit it charges. It just gets to take that unit away. And
Yep.
because of that, it kind of allowed them to play this almost like conservative aggression where they're able to keep hitting you. And that was my experience on the other side of the table from them.
Yeah.
So without overrun, like how are we going to try to make tyrants work?
So, with Flying Hive Tyrants in particular, you're going to be struggling a lot more to do the same game plan of go in, kill something, and leave. That just won't work anymore. However, one thing that Flying Hive Tyrants still do have is mobility, and they are still very, very fast. And something that can be useful for this was something that was experimented with initially, is putting a heavy venom cannon on the Flyrant, because now you have an extremely mobile gun platform that can very easily get angles And because it's shooting only, it doesn't have to leave the safety of being within 3 inches of Tyrant Guard.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. So that is not necessarily an incredibly powerful unit, but the that applicability, I think, puts it into the reason category. I think if
Okay.
you were just looking at the Flaren as a melee only unit, it would be down here with it would have some issues. It would have some serious issues, in particular that anything it's going to kill is going to be losing points in net value. But when you can hang back and still do the, hey, I'm going to do damage to you from range without whilst having that mobility that makes it easy to get angles, I think it becomes a very reasonable unit.
Okay. So it's kind of got a mixed duty of being a long range shooting unit, but it has some psychic powers. It's
It
probably
has
not
good psychic.
horrible in melee, I'm
Nope,
assuming.
it still gets Tyrant Talons, so you're still looking at 7 attacks at strength 7 AP, 3 damage 1,
Hmm.
which is not unreasonable. It's not amazing, but it's if something charges it, they can't just charge it and expect, oh, I'm gonna toss a sacrificial unit in to stop shooting. That's not gonna work.
So tell me about these
Speak
walking variants
Yes,
that we see
speaking
coming
of
up
Hive
next.
Tyrants, these guys I think could get a lot better. So the walking variant is now cheaper, much cheaper than the flying Hive Tyrants. It was already cheaper and it did go up, but it went up less than the flying Hive Tyrants. So it's going to be more of a staple unit and it's much tougher. Now it is less mobile at only, what is it, 8-inch move as opposed to the Flyer's 16-inch move. Mm, but it makes up for that in mobility and having better melee and being cheaper. I think these are basically the state. I think those are going to be staples of
Hmm.
Tyranid lists moving forward, honestly. They are just incredibly tough. They're still good psychers. They have fantastic melee. They have good shooting, just everything you want from a Tyranid character.
And so for loadouts for this, are you loading it out like the picture where it has like the dual bone swords and like a gun? Or how would
Honestly,
you
yeah.
build a walking one? Okay.
I'd say that's just the best loadout still. A heavy venom cannon and then a lash whip and bone sword, because lash whip and bone sword is just very good melee, and then the heavy venom cannon is an excellent gun that can be upgraded with shard gullet relic to make an a very scary gun.
Okay.
Mm,
So it's
a
probably not
flat
diving.
AP5 damage 5.
Yeah. And it's probably not diving into my backline like it
Mm,
was before, but it could still like theoretically by turn two get to the mid table and charge
yeah.
some of my like skirmish units. So that makes sense.
Exactly. And it can also, it's very happy also to just sit back and then turn 3, turn 4, it's coming up and it's starting to do real damage to you. Speaking of things that will come up later and start doing real damage to you, the Swarm Lord. So the Swarm Lord, I honestly not sure where it's going to go here between very solid and staple. What the Swarm Lord does is it is I'm going to put it here tentatively and then might convince myself to put it down here. But the Swarm Lord is a melee only walking hive tyrant. It is considerably more expensive. It's the named version of it. In exchange, you get excellent durability, +1 wound, and change damage roll to 0 in melee every
Hmm.
time, every phase. It gets some really scary melee as well. What is it, like 10 attacks? But the serious thing you're using the Swarm Lord for is the Swarm Lord is a fantastic support character. And in particular, it's very good at supporting some of the units that did not get changed and so got better by omission from the points changes, data slate, etc. It
So how does
gives
it
out,
support your list?
yeah, so it gives out full hit rerolls in the command phase, and it gives a core unit obsec in the command
Hmm.
phase. If the core unit already has obsec, it gets double obsec. That's a
Oh,
very powerful rule.
so you're telling me your Hormagaunts are going to be worth like a 10-man Hormagaunt squad is actually 20 bodies for
Yeah, it's 20
OBSEC?
obsec bodies. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
have fun with that. In particular, in addition, a lot of the new missions especially reward troops, and the Swarm Lord supports troops very well. In particular, he supports Hormagaunts a lot, which is one of the strategies that I think will be very powerful in the new codex, and it's the reason I'm tentatively putting him up here with at staple. Is not the new codex, but the changes, post changes codex. He can get Hormagaunts only have a 4-up weapon skill natively, but he gives them full hit rerolls, which is suddenly a giant boost to their damage output, especially when they have toxin sacks. So sixes to hit auto wound.
Oh, that's some old magic. I'm gonna fish for sixes with my like four attack. Well, Cormagons have a weird amount of attacks, right? Don't they have
They have
like
three
three or
attacks per
something?
model, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They have three attacks, and you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna roll fishing for sixes into my knight or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
That's cool.
there's actually no anti-vehicle clause on that. I can auto wound knights as well. It's just
Mhm.
great. All right. So next up, we are looking at the Moloch. The Moloch's an interesting model. It's a model that has a place in Monster Mash specifically because it can deep strike in very close to the opponent, and then it can get just outside 1 inch of the opponent, and as long as you set it up correctly. And in Monster Mash Territorial Instincts builds, you can make it OBSEC and count as 5 models. That's a very powerful ability for not that much price. It was already seeing some fringe play in Monster Mash lists. It was seeing reasonable play in Monster Mash lists, some fringe play overall, because the Monster Mash was not that popular. So I think that alone would put it in the very solid tier. It
I will
does go
say
down. Yeah,
you did beat me with this once. I was
I
playing the
did beat
new
you with
Chaos
this.
Space Marine. Yeah, I was playing the new Chaos Space Marine book. I didn't know exactly what the Moloch did, but he gave it, I believe he gave it OBSEC, and it came up and it flipped an objective, and it was just like it was huge. It was a huge point swing.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
the
a good unit.
territorial instincts. It's a good unit. The only thing that could drop it down to reasonable instead of very solid, I think it's very solid, but the only thing that could drop it down, I think, is just that some of the factions that are going to be popular, in particular Imperial Guard, have ways to screen out and deny your deep strikes, prevent you coming close to them, which overrides the Moloch's ability.
Hmm.
Against those armies, he's just not a great model. And against those armies, he's down here. But into most armies, he's a very solid unit. Next up, we have the Toxicrene, which goes directly here for friendly games. Um, and I don't like that it does, but it does. That is going to be the case until it gets a new model. So, Walls, have you seen the Toxicrene model?
Yeah, so I actually have one. So they have their hands out like this, and it makes them really hard to move around the table,
Mhm.
and it gets in the way of everything. Super
They're
cool
11 inches
arms.
wide.
Yeah, super cool arms. But
They
I wish they had a rule where it was like, hey guys, it's okay to arm them so that their arms are pointed up or something, you know. But
if you can get them to point their arms up, they suddenly become like a very solid unit. But like they have some great rules. They might even get to staple status, low staple. But with those, when you just cannot move them around the table on any sort of normal terrain, you there's not much you can do. All right, Neurthrope went up 10 to 20 points. Don't remember which. Still a good unit. Just still very good. Like the Neurthrope gives out psychic support. It's better than Swarmlord. Um, it just gives out amazing psychic support. It is still one of the best psychic characters in the entire game. Like Magnus is better than it, and that's kind of it.
Resonance Barb and nonsense, right?
Synaptic Tendrils is usually the one I'd go
Oh,
for.
yes, synaptic tendrils and nonsense. Yeah,
Resonance
I
Barb is
play.
still good, honestly, but Tendrils is what I usually run with it.
I've always played against it and said, "You do what?" So fair.
Yeah, just
Okay.
3d6 cast. It's great. Tyranids have great psychic spells, so you just want to do them. Next up, we have the Hive Guard. Poor Hive Guards. They were a unit that was just not getting taken, and then they went up.
What do we do with
Sorry,
them?
guys.
Oh, feels bad.
uh, I think they go at the top of it because so Impaler Hive Guard are unfortunately just an awful unit. Like they are legitimately not good. However, Hive Guard has shock cannons as an option, and that alone might put them up to just having some issues. because there's a trick you can do with them. Mm, Now, stay with me here for a minute.
Okay.
We're getting into some tech.
Okay.
You take these Hive Guard, you run the naturalized camouflage custom trait in one of the Hive fleets. That gives them a +1 to their armor save when they're in cover. They have a 3-up armor save natively in their infantry, so that gets them to a 1-up armor save effectively. Armor of Contempt is about to be a real thing. So sorry, Armor of Contempt is going away. So AP
Yeah.
1 and 2 is going to get more common as a consequence. Mm, which means Hiveguard get to have fun against AP 1 and 2. They don't mind it that much when they're in that camo. Finally, the last part of this combo, they can do an action to count as being 3 models on objectives, which is just kind of good.
Okay. I played against somebody who they used that count as 3 models on objectives and they delivered them by Tyrannocyte, like the drop pod.
Yes, you bring them with
And
Tyrannocytes.
yeah, and I think like I even think, and I could be wrong, but they gave like the drop pod territorial instincts or something like that, so
Yeah,
it
they could
counted
do
as
that.
5 in OBSEC. Okay,
Mhm.
so I played against that. It was funny. I didn't think it was horrible, but I didn't look at the points, so maybe it was horrible in context of what it could have been. But
Kind of
that
expensive,
seems
but
it seems
it's
whatever.
it's a legit. It's not bad, honestly. I know that people saw my expression just now. It's expensive. That is why. But
Understood.
the Hefguard are what I think 50 points a model. Mm, and
Ouch.
a Tyrannocyte is 110. So
Yeah,
their problem is just that they're kind of expensive and their shooting output is not amazing.
fair enough.
So it's fine, but it's not amazing. It's not worth the points just for shooting. I think they have some play, but they have issues.
So their issues is their points, realistically,
Their issues
because
is their points, realistically. Yeah.
right,
And their
because
shooting just being anemic.
the venom, not the venom throat. What is that guy called? The big guy with the hands, Toxicrin. So the
Yes.
Toxicrin, his problem really is that he can't be played because of his arms. Whereas
Yes.
these guys' problem is like, well, okay, they need a point drop.
They need a
Okay, that
point
makes
drop or
sense.
they need their guns to get better. And until then, they're just not great. Next up, we have the Broodlord, who did not change at all, but got better because everything else went up. The Broodlord is a decent unit, honestly. I'm not going to put it in the staple tier. Some people will, but I'm not. I think it's just a very solid unit. It's decent melee, not great, but decent. It's a psyker and it forward deploys. That's kind of all it does. It has a command phase buff, but it's not a command phase buff that matters. And then it's just 120. Not bad.
Reasonable. Yeah.
Reasonable. You're not gonna hate it if you run it. It's gonna do decent work. It's not gonna be an all-star, but it's gonna be solid. Carnifexes. So these guys went up low. Carnifexes were one of the better units in Monster Mash. Not great, but solid. And they had a point increase. I do not remember how many points they went up by, but whether it was +5 or +10. But I think either way, they fit into the reasonable category. Probably slightly above the wing type turret, but not by much. They,
There's still certain hive traits and stuff that make them
yeah.
better. And I think with Behemoth, you still like them. They're still good. Like,
In Behemoth, they're solid, honestly. In Behemoth and Jormungandr, they're still just
yeah.
like a solid unit, honestly. They have very respectable melee. You can put a heavy venom cannon on them, and they get very respectable shooting. That's the best loadout. The rest of them are not as good, but they are a flexible units. The Screamer Killers and Thornbacks are unfortunately just not very good. The normal Carnifexes are kind of better. I think Screamers actually didn't go up in points at all. So they might be worth a look. They're a very, very fast melee. They're a very fast melee Carnifex with a boatload of attacks. Mm, but I would probably rather have the flexibility of just having multiple Carnifexes that have guns and melee available to them. Okay, next up, the Lictor. Lictor is a reasonable unit, honestly. I'm saying it. The Lictor is a unit that is infantry. It has a fun strat that makes +2 if you're within 6 inches of something. Everyone gets +2 to charge that thing. It
Can't they
can't be
also
charged.
retreat?
Yes, they have access to the hidden hunter stratagem,
Yeah.
which at the end of the turn lets them go back into reserves. Which is actually a very strong stratagem. Now they don't do much. They have decent melee, but not great melee.
I played against one of them once, and the way they used to
Mhm.
them is they would have them hop onto an objective, put up a banner, and then the banner happens, and then they would return to reserve essentially,
Yep.
with their strat. I thought that was cute. I don't know,
Yeah,
seems cute.
it's cute. Next up, we have Death Leaper, which is the character elector. I'm gonna call him a very solid unit because I don't think he went up at all, and he was already just a very solid unit. Honestly, he's probably going to up ahead of the Brood Lord. So he's got a lot of just rules jank that he gets to have fun with. Mm, and just is kind of a good unit. He has good melee. He's really hard to shoot. He gets to shut off your stratagems, he gets to shut off your actions, he gets to just really mess with your opponent in a lot of ways. And I really like him for that. Oh yeah, he also gets the warlord trait, Alien Cunning, which makes him absent counts as 5 models. He can also advance and also lets him advance in action or fall back in action, which just is so good mission play. The mission play on this man is stupid.
So tell me
Mm.
about Freud's favorite monster that's coming up next.
The Exocrine. The Exocrine did not change at all. So previously I would have put it in a reasonable tier of having some issues. I think it may go up to like the bottom of very solid because the Exocrine, it's a good shooting monster. Just legitimately good at shooting you. Mm. It has a lot of good anti-Terminator shots in particular. And guess
Oh,
what's about to become a thing? Terminators.
fair.
Yeah. Gets to ignore cover, which is just always nice. The big problem with the Exocrine is that as soon as it gets its weapon is blast and it has no way to fall back and shoot. That's the problem.
So
That's the
don't let
problem.
them touch it. So
Don't let
I
them touch it.
guess
This is a backline units, to be
yeah.
clear.
So while the Carnifexes run around and kind of skirmish and shoot their guns while they move up the table, the Exocrine sits in the back and kind of just pew, pew.
Yeah, it just shoots things. It
Okay.
just shoots fairly well. So it's not bad at its role. It's a good shooting unit.
Okay.
Gargoyles. Staples, straight up. They are infantry, they fly, their objective secured, and they are not expensive, and they're not going up. They are amazing right now. They're just gonna get better. You run them. That's it.
Yeah, they're good.
No further comments. Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers. I'm not sure
That's a
if they
really
get.
spicy take, I think,
They
if you
don't.
said very
Yeah, they don't
solid.
get to deserve there. They don't
Yeah.
deserve it. I'd say they're reasonable. They have decent melee, not great melee, decent melee. They get to forward deploy. Yeah, that's kind of it.
If you put them in cover and you give them, there's like some sort of ability where you can give
Extended
them like,
carapace.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can get them like Space Marine saves, which is very cute in friendly games.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's about it.
Yes.
Honestly, no, I'm talking about it. They're going down.
We talked about them too long. They've literally dropped 2 ranks as we've talked about them. Well,
Honestly,
okay.
I wasn't even like intending to put them here. I just kind of dragged them over and they landed there. So,
I counter offer you that they do have some issues, but I could definitely see the forward deploy aspect of them being good in
yeah,
very
that's
particular
fair.
matchups. And I
That's
think
fair.
I
There's one or two
think
matchups where forward deploy is just really nice to have.
yes. And there's a handful of armies right now that really care about forward deploy. Like this is something that hurts the scout
Like,
sentinels from guard. It can tie up random stuff. It
Snorkelings! I'm putting them
yeah
up. They're
yes
reasonable.
yes they're good against nurglings,
They're good against
and they're
snorkeling.
also they're also very good against blood angels because, and this is really important, blood angels can't pregame move to within 9 inches of one of your units. So if you have
Yep.
one unit of Gene Stealer cults, their death company have to stay in their deployment zone. If you just put
Hmm.
them kind of like on the line of their deployment, which is super
Yeah,
cute
you
and it
get to
slows
just
them
mess with
down.
them.
Yeah, it slows them down
It's kind of
huge.
fun. All right. Next up, the Tyrannocyte. Yeah, just a solid unit. Didn't go up or down. It's good and it's got some uses in territorial instincts builds. It's basically a drop pod for Tyranids, but it can move afterwards and shoot technically. Doesn't shoot well, but it shoots. Just
When
like
your
you're in a drop pod.
Overwatch is almost as good as your regular shooting, you know.
It's my regular shooting is twice as good as Overwatch. Or equally as good compared to some Overwatch.
That's the spirit. That's the
That's the
spirit.
spirit. And
Uh,
worse than Iron Hands Overwatch.
so you said it was very solid, but you actually want to put it in the very solid tier.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Um, I don't think it deserves it. I do think it's a legitimate unit. I think it goes kind of living in here with the Lictor and Gene Stealers.
Okay.
It's a unit that I'm fine with taking. I'm not gonna like turn my nose up to it if I see it in a list, but it's not something I'm going to be rushing to include either. Now, the Hero Specs has some issues. The Hero Specs has exactly one issue, which is that it moves 8 inches and is a monster and is melee only. Yeah,
Fair.
that's the issue. It's
Yeah.
just it's hard for it to get where it needs to go, and in order for it to get where it needs to go, it has to spend multiple turns in the open, which is not something you want to be doing most of the time, especially against shooting armies. Now, once it does get to melee, it is legitimately very good at melee, and it is pretty tough. Like it's T8, 2-up save, 15 wounds. That is not something that you can just trivially kill.
Another cute thing in Jormungandr, you can make it burrow up so it has like a weird deep strike. That
Yeah,
is kind of cute, but that's it.
it's
That's the
kind of
only thing I
cute.
can think of.
I mean, strategic reserves are gonna be free, and that
Yeah,
actually helps it.
yeah.
Mm.
So
It helps solve it. Actually, it helps solve it a little, so I think it goes above 5 guard.
yeah.
Oh, also, I just realized strategic reserves are free, so this the Tyrannocyte goes below Gene Stealers.
Oh, fair.
Yeah. All right. The Hive Crone. Yeah.
Be really careful here. Be really careful here. Oh, you know what? It's hard to bring flyers now. That's the thing.
Hard to bring flyers now.
That's the
Flyers need
thing.
to actually do stuff.
Because like I don't
And
think Helldrakes are bad, and the Hive Crone is just like a better Helldrake. But then I was
it is
thinking
kind
about
of
it,
a
and I'm
better
like,
Heldrake.
you,
But also
it,
the Harpy still exists.
right?
And
The
it
Harpy
is
is
still
just
a worse
better.
Harpy.
Yeah, the Harpy is just better, and also now flyers are harder to include. So it's kind of like, okay,
Yep.
fair, fair, okay.
So the Harpy got worse. The heavy venom cannons went up another 15 points each. So you just don't take heavy venom cannons. You take Stranglethorn cannons, and that's what you do. Um, and that's it. That's how harpies are run. They also got hurt with the Spore Mine nerf, which is that now they have to pay points when they spawn in Spore Mines. Hilariously, they do
Forcing
not have to
out.
put space points when they do their bombing run, which is still fun,
Good.
and they like doing bombing runs. They starting in Strat Reserves is actually I am not convinced it's a nerf to them.
Okay.
Because the points where on Harpies were not good are when you are against a heavy shooting army and you go second. And then you're either in the position of, oh, I have to strat reserve them, and that costs me CP. It's expensive to do. I don't want to do that. Tyranids have amazing stratagems. Or I don't start them in reserve. And then I have a 50% chance of losing Harpies. This solves that problem. Easy peasy. Strat reserves are free. Just put them in strat reserve.
Okay. So
So I
they
think
got
they're
nerfed, but they're still definitely an
one
amazing
version of them
unit.
got nerfed, but they're still just a really good unit. I'm actually going to put them up here.
I think they deserve to be. They've
Mhm.
done so much damage to me as a player just playing against them, and
As a human being.
as a human being, it's done so much emotional damage to me. Shooting my entire list at a harpy and doing no damage, and you can still theoretically do that. So
Yeah, oh no, yeah, they're still just very tough still, especially in Leviathan. They just kind of don't die. Hormagaunts. They are also very, very solid. I think they might reach status.
that's wild.
They they're probably in very solid status just because strength 3, AP 1, damage 1, even at super high volume, just has some matchups that it's anemic into, in particular Votan. The reason that I'm tempted to put them in stable is because I think there's going to be a lot of competitive lists that are running multiple units of 15 Hormagaunts.
I will also
Because,
say I don't think there's a huge opportunity cost to
yeah, I'm
running
putting
them
them in play.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm putting them in stable.
there,
Just straight up.
there's situations where the gargoyles are going to be better because
Hmm.
they have fly and all those other good things. But the Hormagaunts are still reasonably fast, and there will be some matchups where they're super relevant. So
Yep. They also have a just stratagem, 1 CP, automatically advance 6 inches, and advance in charge, which is just an incredible stratagem. Speaking of Hormagaunts, places their best. Gorgon, Kraken. Yeah, those two mainly. So Gorgon Hormagaunts are amazingly deadly. They're like one of the most deadly units in the game, point for point. Just they hit absurdly hard. Full hit rerolls from Swarmlord. We talked about this earlier.
yep.
They and 5+ to hit auto wounds.
Oh, ow, ow. Oh,
Hey, you recognize that 5+ to hit auto wounds?
I
Where have
do.
we heard this before?
That sounds like Votan, but
It does actually, yeah. I was thinking of Kazurkin, but
all the new
no
codexes.
mortal wound nonsense, sadly. But also they're cheap and they're fast and they have a lot of attacks. And I do mean a lot. Plus they're obsec. So
Yes.
just good things all around. All right, Maliceptor. Maliceptor actually good.
Ooh, why is
I'll
that?
tell you straight up, this is going in the very solid tier. Uh,
Okay.
so the Maliceptor, I've heard two different rumors about him, and I don't know which is true. One says that he's going down 20 points, in which case he goes into staple tier. Another says that he's staying the same. Staying the same, the Maliceptor was a sneakily good unit. Mm, it's very tough. 4 up invulnatively, 3 up save, toughness 8, 15 wounds. Has an aura for -1 strength per incoming firepower. Very, very relevant against strength 8 in particular, given its toughness
Oh.
8.
Oh, that Rex guard. So
That Rex guard.
that
Yeah.
Rex guard shooting at monsters. The just so people know at home, the guard battle tanks, they're just spamming the plasma guns, like the plasma eradicator or whatever
Hmm.
it's called. And reducing the strength of that by 1 is huge on the math
Yeah, because it's
against your
strength 8.
monsters. Yeah.
Suddenly they're
Oh,
wounding monsters on 5s.
nice. Very
And
nice.
this thing does a lot of mortal wounds still. If it gets close to you, you're just taking mortal wounds when it casts. I was doing the math a while ago. It's like you're looking at like 8 mortal wounds every time it casts, 8 to 9 mortals that it just spits out if it's doing the damaging spells.
Thankfully, it doesn't do like
That's just
14
really good.
anymore.
No. I think it was 7 to 8 mortals, yeah. It removes some of the nasty combos, but you can still give it the Neurthroat buff
Yeah.
with synaptic tendrils maybe, so that it casts on 3d6 and suddenly it's hitting that 7+ very reliably. And it just remains a very good unit, honestly. I'm gonna put it
Okay.
up here.
I think
Mm,
that's fair.
I think it's slightly above a harpy.
Really? That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah,
Move on before
not
we
by a
change
lot
minds.
below. Old One Eye. Old One Eye is my favorite model, favorite unit, not favorite model, favorite unit in Tyranids. And they butchered him. 25 points up.
Look at how they massacred my boy. Okay. Where do you think that leaves him?
Like right about here.
He was pretty good before. Like he had like a
Yeah, he
niche
was
role in
really good.
certain.
Like
Yeah.
well, the thing is, he can kind of just run over to a flank and then start ripping through their entire flank as he just goes around and kills everything and is actually very hard to kill himself. Just a very solid unit.
He buffs Carnifexes and
He does.
Carnifexes getting a little bit weaker also is somewhat of a double nerf, in that you maybe aren't wanting to bring as many Carnifexes, but
Yeah,
just a
he was still
thought.
good without other Carnifexes. That was more of a side buff, honestly. Pyrovores. Pyrovores actually get really good here.
Hmm.
Mm, because they don't go up, so they're 40 points for a fairly tough body, which is something that Tyranids don't have a lot of access to, a tough mid-sized body after the nerfs, because all the other tough mid-sized body got just major increases.
Hmm.
And so it just ends up being very solid. It also just has a good flamer profile on it. I think it's like top of very solid. It might hit staple, honestly.
Very cute.
Bottom of staple tier. It's just very solid. Yeah, I'm saying very solid, so it's in very solid tier.
It's
That's how it
very solid, so
works.
it's in very solid. You know, there's a I don't know what the high fleet
That's
is
how this
because
works.
I'm a Tyranid smooth brain, but I don't know what the high fleet is. But isn't there a high fleet where like when he shoots, he or not auto wins, he wins on 4 pluses? Like
Yeah,
it's
that's
like a
Gorgon.
poison. Gorgon.
Hmm.
Interesting. So that would be kind of a cute little combo that you
It's
could
kind
do
of
if you
cool.
were,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're
And
doing
you can
Hormagaunts.
also, yep, and Gorgon also you can do naturalized camouflage, which suddenly he's got that 3-up save into his infantry, so he gets that 1-up save. Toughness 5, 5 wounds for 40 points, 1-up save. Raveners. So these were one of the best units in Tyranids previously, and they got nerfed to the tune of plus 15 points per model.
Oh,
So they're now 50
oh,
apiece.
ow. That's like a
Yeah, ow.
20% or more.
I think that's like 40%. They were
40. Jeez.
35 points before that. You're looking at like 35% increase.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that drops it down to just having some issues. And it's still a very fast unit, and Overrun works on it, which is great, but it's just so expensive for what you get now. On the other hand, let's talk about something that didn't get nerfed. Termagants.
Hey, they
Hey,
got buffed,
so
I would argue.
yeah, honestly, yeah, I would say they got buffed. I think these are like maybe the best unit in the Codex post nerf.
Fair.
So Termagants were already really good with a Turfgon, because you can respawn so many Termagants per turn. You just flood them out. You're looking at 2d6 plus d3 plus 3 per turn with 1 CP.
And well, there's some synergies you can give them as well. And one other thing I
Mhm.
wanted to mention, Armor of Contempt going away is huge for
Oh yeah, now
Termagants,
their
which have
AP1 matters. Yeah.
their AP1 matters. So I
Hmm.
think they're just good.
I think they're just good. The objective play that you can do with them is absolutely criminal.
Mhm.
Mm, just you can string them out, respawn. Suddenly you had like 10 Termagants left from your brick of 30, and then and they were like mostly in the back of your deployments. You respawn, suddenly they're back to 30 of them, and they're on your opponent's objectives.
Yeah. So with that mentioned, what about the Turvagon? So that's the thing you're talking about with the respawning mechanics
Yes.
and stuff. So this is the one that brings back Turvagons or
I'm
Termagants
not sure this
and
is this
can,
high, but it's in the stable tier. It's somewhere in the stable tier. Mm.
yeah. Where does it the Turvagon go? With Termagant stock up, like what are we doing here?
Honestly, Turvagon just goes with the Termagants, slightly above, because the Turvagon is technically a better unit than Termagants. If you're taking the Turvagon, you're taking Termagants. If you're taking Termagants, you're taking the Turvagon. They're kind of a package deal, and they're a very powerful package deal.
Yeah, so with the Turvagons and Termagants kind of coming back into the Tyranid lists, having played against this a couple of times, there's a lot of cute things that I've seen them be able to do. Like you said, you can kind of regrow forward, steal objectives, that kind of thing. You can also make the Turvagons hit really hard. There's a relic
Yes.
they can take that makes their claws really threatening. And I also believe that it's there's like something called like the Norn Crown or Synaptic Linchpin or something like that that can extend the range on its resurrection. I could
Synaptic
be wrong
Linchpin,
about
yeah.
that.
So
Okay.
there's one that gives it a normally it has to spawn. It spawns in 10 Termagants once per game, and then it can regen Termagants every turn. Those both have to be wholly within 6 inches of it. Synaptic Linchpin, I believe, is the warlord trait you're thinking of, which
Okay.
extends that to 9 inches. And that is not bad. The other thing you can give it is the Heightened Senses warlord trait to really lean into its combat abilities, which gives it full hit rerolls and
Mm,
fights first. This is full hit rerolls makes it suddenly quite good because it only has 3 up weapon skill natively. And
interesting.
it also makes it continue to be threatening even as it brackets.
And you could give it like the Maw Claws as
The Maw
well,
Claws
right?
of Thyrex for +1 attack and full wound rolls. That relic is just incredible on a Turvagon, and you should take that on most Turvagons.
So pretty quickly, you're rerolling all your hits, you're rerolling all your wounds, and you're fighting
You have
first
extra
on.
attacks,
Yeah.
and you're fighting first. And then in addition, you've also got this, it's got this fun rule with the Maw Claws, where every time you kill a unit, you get another attack.
Hmm.
It has a sweep profile, so you can double the number of attacks that you make. So you can very, very quickly get it, especially with adrenal glands, which unlocks a stratagem to give it another D3 attacks. You can get it to just incredible number of attacks that it's putting out. You're looking at 5 attack space +1 for Maw Claws of Thyrex. I don't remember if it's 5 or 4. I think it's 5. Yeah, might be 4. If it's, I think it might be 4. If it's 4, I'll figure it out later.
Whatever.
Whatever. You're looking at a lot of attacks.
Something like
+1
10
for
or
Maw
12.
Claws, plus D3. You're looking at 10 attacks once you start killing Unix, like 10 attacks just normally,
Oh,
and then
geez.
up to 20 attacks if you go for a sweep profile,
That's nuts.
which
So
just it's really hard.
it also has that synergy of like the Termagants protect the Big Mama from getting shot,
Mhm.
and Big Mama protects the Termagants from getting charged a little bit because it can go out and pick up
Yep,
the unit that
charging
charges them.
is just a very dangerous prospect.
Interesting. Very strong.
Next up we have the Trigon, and I believe Trigon Prime because it's the same model. So, the Trigon is not great. It's just kind of it's this weird monster that gets a little better because of a special rule where it can bring in a unit that was in strategic reserves anywhere on the battlefield. Instead of them having to be in come in within 6 of about board edge, which is a fun rule and also has deep strike itself. The problem is that it doesn't hit very hard.
Mm.
And you'd think it would, because you're looking at 12 attack, strength 7, AP3, damage 2. But it still doesn't, with only 3 up weapon skill and no real way to improve that. You're just looking at not fantastic melee output. However, the Trigon Prime gets around that a little bit because the Trigon Prime is like a normal Trigon. It has better shooting, it has a good command phase buff, and it can get that all important Heightened Senses warlord trait for reroll hit rolls and fights first. But yeah, whatever. Don't care about that. So you bring one in, you bring in some sort of combat unit with it, and then you use Shardler for 1 CP. Mm. You shoot something, use Shardler because it is a synapse unit itself, the Trigon Prime.
Yeah.
So it shoots something, and then it gets to do a 3d6 charge, drop the lowest into that thing.
Interesting.
And
So
that's not bad.
it has a decent delivery, and then it also does a reasonable amount of damage. So where would you put
Yep.
that, like in terms of overall relevance?
I'd put it slightly below the Exocrine.
Okay.
The problem with the Trigon is that it's very fragile, and the Trigon Prime as well. That's the biggest problem it has. That compared to an Exocrine, which you're looking at toughness 8s, 15 wounds, 2 up save, all these nice numbers. Trigon Prime, you're looking at toughness 7, 3 up save, 13 wounds,
Ooh. Yeah.
which are a lot less nice numbers. Now, it's harder to kill in melee than it is in shooting, -1 to hit. And you can make it even harder to kill in melee with the biostatic rattle. So next up, Trigon Prime. Trigon Prime's an interesting one. It has a useful imperative, which is exploding sixes and shooting.
Hmm.
And it's a decent combat character. It also gives out reroll ones to wound for core units as a command phase buff. It's relatively cheap, not super cheap. I believe it's 85 points. And it's just kind of like a solid units. It's oftentimes struggles to find a role, but
Hmm.
it's fairly good in shooting heavy lists, and I think shooting heavy lists are going to become more viable after the nerfs to Tyranids. So overall, I'd put it reasonable, I'd say. I think it's
Okay.
below like old One Eye, but above a Lictor.
So it's like you could bring this, especially if you're shooting heavy, but it's probably not the best thing
Yeah,
for that point cost. Okay,
I'd agree with
understandable.
that. Next up, Biovores. Did not go up in points, but they have to pay for the spore mines they spawn, and that unfortunately puts them right here.
Oh, ouch.
Biovores were an incredible unit, and this does actually kill them. I'm sorry to say. They're amazing in Crusade.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Tyrannifex. The Tyrannifex, it went up 20 points. It probably deserved because it was previously maybe the best unit in Monster Mash. Kind of the defining characteristic of Monster Mash was the Tyrannifexes with Acid Spray, which were just a fantastic, super tough mid-board bully unit. They did go up in points. Now they're 210 for the Acid Spray version, and that's still reasonably tough, but not incredibly so. I think they still will see play, but you're not going to see lists running like 3 Tyrannifexes, which you were previously. 2 or 3 Tyrannifexes were just being run in a lot of lists. The acid spray does get a little, the nerf is kind of counteracted a little bit by the effects of the free strategic reserves, because
Fair.
that allows it to come in and then get in range for its acid spray automatically. That synergy is a lot of why it was used in Jormungandr, which can be used for free deep strikes. Being
Mm.
able to do that now without having to pay the CP is actually a huge deal for it and keeps it still very much in relevancy, I would say. So I put it up here.
So is
Mm,
it performing less well as a gunboat than the Exocrine now?
yeah. So it has a slightly different role. It's a better as a mid-board gun unit. It's worse in terms of just damage output.
Okay,
There's also the Rupture Cannon Tyrannifex, which is good in Leviathan, but otherwise it just gets outperformed by the Exocrine.
understandable.
Mm. Tyrant Guard. Tyrant Guard went up 5 points per model, and they're still staples.
Yeah, especially as long as that tyrants are in
As
staples,
long as
they're in
tyrants are
staples.
good, these guys are in staples.
Yeah.
They went up some points. They needed to go up some points, but they're still just really good. Venom Thropes, which really are the same thing. Venom they also went up 5. Venom Thropes at 35 points a model was kind of absurd, honestly, for what they did. I
Yes,
think they're still just a fantastic unit.
I think so too. I
Mm,
think that the math on them before was like the only thing that stopped people from bringing big gobs of them was just the fact that there were other things they'd rather use their points on.
yeah,
I think
exactly.
them going up in points is really important because
Mhm.
otherwise, I think they
Otherwise, you
would be
would
kind
see
of
big gods of them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think they would just immediately be like, "Hey, we're a great Tyranid warrior kind of replacement," like in a
Yeah,
weird way, you
exactly.
know?
But they're still just a very solid unit. They're just a staple, honestly.
Mhm.
I'm just putting them up there. Next up, Tyranid Warriors, which also got hit pretty hard. So Tyranid Warriors were a staple in Tyranid competitive lists. They got hit severely with the Leviathan nerf, and that put them down into very solid tier. But they were still getting run just very consistently because they're excellent melee. They had free war, could get bone sword, the dual bone swords, which are incredible, and the death spitter, which is amazing for free. And that is not a true statement anymore. +5 for dual bone swords specifically, and +5 to put a gun on them at all, and then +5 base. So in theory, one could go up +15 points. Now,
So I mean, this is emblematic of what the issue was with the Tyranid Codex on release, which was Tyranid
mhm,
warriors were just more efficient than anything else in the game by
yeah,
data slate. That
yeah,
feels
just
like
data
any
sheet,
kind of
just
yeah.
they were just too efficient. Mm,
And now they're at a stage where I think they have gotten one round of nerf and another round of nerf, and finally this third one. I think they're at the spot now where I don't want them in my army, but I don't know. Is that how you feel? Like more
I
than
think,
one?
yeah, I think they are still solid to have one unit of them, probably not a large unit, and you load them out with all melee options, probably the Lash Whip and Bone Sword and Scything Talons.
Hmm. So
And
where does that put
they
them?
still hit fairly hard for their points, but they are very fragile.
So
For
just kind of a
that would
counter
put them,
charge.
yeah, a counter charge. I'm
Yeah.
putting them in reasonable tier.
Okay.
That puts them into a fairly solid spot. I think they go above Old One Eye just because of that specific loadout that you can get on them. I think the old Tyranid warriors are down into the has some issues tier, the Death Spitter and Dual Bone Swords, because they're just too expensive. Now you can't run them like that. But if you load them out cheap, then they're pretty reasonable, which ironically is exactly where we were last Codex. And we're back there again. So next up we have Zoanthropes, which were a silly good unit in the Tyranid Codex to the point that you were starting to see lists running 3 units of 3 and got hit appropriately really hard in the balance patch, +20 points per model. Now, one unit of these still does a lot for your army. Having access to that imperative, which is a 4-up invuln for monsters and a 5-up for non-monsters, is still really, really good. However, they're not auto-include anymore. They still smite very hard, but they're around the same points as a Maliceptor now,
Oof.
and a Maliceptor does a lot more mortal wound output and has a slightly worse imperative, but not much worse, and does a lot of the support for monsters in particular that you really wanted from your Zoanthropes. So overall, however, Zoanthropes do retain their relevancy a lot because of Termagants being so good. Because Zoanthropes give out that five all important 5-up info for Termagants,
Yep.
which is just incredible for them. Especially in Leviathan, where you can just keep putting it on every single turn. And for that, I think they go at the top of reasonable tier.
That
They're
feels
going to,
fair.
they're not an auto include, not by a long shot, but you'll see them in a lot of lists.
Yeah, I think
Not every list, but a lot of them.
at a certain point, you have to make an evaluation. Like, is it better that it's like because for just three of them now, it's like the price of a monster. And you
Yeah.
have to make the evaluation: is just a monster better than making my other stuff more survivable? And I think sometimes just having another monster is
Mhm.
actually better. Just having more stuff is actually better than
Yeah.
the imperative.
Now, Zoanthropes do smite very hard.
Yeah.
So they are not just the imperative, but the imperative is kind of, they're not good enough just with smiting. You're only going to run them if you really want their imperative. Next up, the Forge World units. Well, before we do
Ooh.
that, Purper Swarms. I'd say they have some issues. They kind of just don't have a role. They're not OBSEC. They are cheap, and that's good,
Yeah.
but they don't do much.
Yeah. You can do a like really cute, not very good thing for friendly games where you give them all spine fists, so they have a lot of random shots, and then you give those spine fists 4 pluses to odd or to wound in shooting phase with that high
Yeah,
fleet. So that's,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
kind of entertaining.
that's the only role I
Uh,
can think of for them
Honestly, I might
really.
put them down here.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's you're just never gonna see them in a in a competitive game. But for friendly games, they're not bad.
Yeah.
The Hierophants. I'm gonna put it here. Mm, because the Hierophant still has a 2-up save, a 5-up invuln, and can get high fleet traits now. And that's actually fairly good for it. It's still a very, very, very expensive unit. And that's why it's probably never going to rise above having just have some issues because it's 850 points in one model.
And it's
And it
close to that
has
in dollars too. It's like it's almost
yeah.
$850.
Yes. Not to mention their Dawn of War, it's really hard to deploy on. So
Mhm.
you can't really deploy it on Dawn of War and you can't strategic reserve it without losing a turn. So that those are just issues with it that it's kind of never going to get around. But other than that, it's good. The Scythe Hieroduel. That one honestly is pretty reasonable now. I'd put it similar to Old One Eye.
Really? Okay. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
so it has 18 wounds, hurts it a lot, but strategic reserves helps that a lot. It's similar to a Tyranid. It has a good shooting gun, a good flamer, and it has really good melee.
Hmm.
And it's expensive. If just is 235 points, but it's not bad. It's fine.
Can you use Catalyst on it?
Yes, 5-up
So
Feel
there
Pain.
that makes like one of them kind of
hmm
cute if you put the five
You
up
can
Feel No Pain on it.
well, you can also use an upgrade for Dermic Symbiosis to give it a 4-up invuln permanently.
Ooh.
And that's suddenly you're looking at actually that's not that easy to kill.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's kind
So
of
I
that's kind
think
of a
it's very
tanky model.
reasonable. Yeah, put down strategic reserves. It gets to do nonsense to people. It's not bad. The Harridan, unfortunately, that one is for friendly games. Has all the problems that a Hierophant does, and doesn't have an invuln and has no way to get an invuln except for the Zone Thrope Imperative, which only works for one turn. Yeah, that's and also it can't gain obsec. Well, it can, but it doesn't do anything.
Okay, fair.
uh,
Rip
the
the era
Barb,
of Crusher Stampede where it was actually pretty good.
yeah,
So,
it was pretty good there because it was actually very tanky. It's just not anymore. So,
yeah.
the Barbed Hero Duel. I'm gonna say it has some issues. It's very similar to the Scythe Hero Duel. It has it might be reasonable now. Strategic reserves is good for it. Free strat reserves is really good for these 18 wound monsters that were just struggling to hide previously. And so you get the situation of okay, I can start. It's still relatively tanky. Toughness 8, 2-up saved, 18 wounds. That's not easy to shift. And it shoots respectively well. It is more expensive and has more worse melee than a Scythe Tower Duel, but you get better shooting. That's the trade-off. That's about it. Kind of all I have to say. The Stone Crusher Carnifex is for friendly games. It does not have -1 damage.
Oh, it doesn't?
Nope,
Oh,
just
funny.
doesn't.
So
Yeah.
the tankiest of the Carnifexes in lore is
Oh,
actually the
it
least
is
tanky.
by far the weakest Carnifex by quite a
Wow.
long shot, actually. It's also 3-up save, not 2-up save.
Okay.
So, yeah, you run in a friendly game if you really want to, but not yeah, that's about it.
The feast or famine of Forge World units,
Uh-huh.
sometimes horribly irrelevant.
Yep. The Dema Kairon. Okay. Strat Reserves helps this one. I haven't decided on this one. Straight up, it's going either in reasonable or having some issues.
It can't overrun anymore.
It cannot overrun anymore, and that's not it. It didn't really need to overrun anymore, but because it's so fragile, it's gonna die to shooting anyways. Mm. It does have a native 5-up invuln, which is actually nice. Toughness 7 though, 18 wounds, so expensive. It got a points increase when Old Swarmlord existed, and I think it's just suffering because of that, and will continue to suffer because of that. I'm
Fair.
putting it down here. I think it's just not very good. The Malinthrope. This one has some issues. It's going down here. It's actually not a bad model. Mm, it has some decent rules with it. It also has one glaring issue, which is that Venomthropes are in fact still just better.
Fair. So it pushes it
That
out of relevancy.
pushes it out of relevancy. It's a decent model, but doesn't really do much. Well, it does a lot, but Venomthropes do it better.
Doesn't do much that Venomthropes don't do.
Yep. It's an
Yeah.
HQ, which is cute. Mm, so it can get Lookout Sir, which is cute, but much worse melee, less mobile.
Venomthropes have random shooting.
Venomthropes are cheaper. No, they don't, but they have
Oh, they
melee.
don't? Oh, they did.
They
They
actually
lost
have good
that.
melee.
They used to have those stupid. It might have been in the
I
last
remember
codex.
those. That was in
Yeah.
Last Codex, 8th
Oh,
edition.
okay. Oh,
So
but
yeah,
yeah, I feel like this list feels pretty fair. The only things that stick out to me, not being a Tyranid player, but it's very noticeable, is it feels like I'm becoming a lot more infantry based. A lot more like run the little guys. Those are becoming really relevant. Whereas before you brought like more big
mid-sized.
models. Yeah. And
The
you brought a lot
previous
more
build, it was
warriors,
all, yeah. So I think before this slate, the meta for Tyranids was kind of you run a lot of the medium-sized models, Tyrant Guard, Venomthropes, Warriors, Raveners. Mm, Now it's kind of you're either going to be running the smaller models or you're going to be going heavy into the Monster Mash style lists.
which list do
Mm,
you think is better right now, just from your position?
I think the lots of small models is slightly better. The
Okay.
term I'm particularly think that the Termagant Swarm escaping just made out like bandits because you get to just and to be clear, I'm not talking like 90 Termagants, I'm talking like 30 into Termagant, and then
Yeah.
you get to do whatever you want with the rest of your list. Mm, And that gets to it's really, really good at the new missions, which heavily favor troops, and it's didn't go up in points. It's very good at primary, and Tyranids are going to be all about primary. They were already very much primary centric, and they're getting even more so. And I think they're just that's a solid list.
A good friend of ours, his name is Chris Goslin. He went to Nova, and we spent some time with him there at the event. He brought a double Turvagon list with 30 Termagants, I believe.
I think it was 60.
And 60, that's right, 60
Hmm.
Termagants. And like two Harpies or something.
Yeah, two
And
harpies as well.
he brought that to Nova, and he managed to get a top 5 placement at the event. Um,
Did
and
he?
that,
Wild.
yes, he did. Yeah, he did. He
Hmm.
finished in the top 5 because he lost his
Yeah.
first game in the top 8 and then
Ah,
swept
that
from
was what
there.
happened. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then he swept from there. So he actually managed to get like fifth, I believe,
Hmm.
at the event, fifth or fourth. And
Yep.
he was running that Turvagon build. Well, that Turvagon build has not necessarily gotten worse. None of those
It's
models I
gotten a
mentioned.
slight points increase for some of the supporting units,
Yeah.
but that's kind of it.
Yeah. And so that's a competitive list, I think, that stands out to me. I think walking tyrants need to be explored more. I don't think that's an
Yep,
area that's super explored because they were being shoved out of the spotlight by the Flyrant. So I definitely like that there. And it's good to see that the Neuranthrope still definitely has its place as kind of your utility caster. It's just super safe and it does all of the
yep,
important psychic shenanigans that you need to pull off with your turn. So um,
exactly.
I think Tyranids survived the nerf. Definitely not as powerful as they were prior to
Yep.
it, though. I will say that.
They're also going to have to pivot significantly. The previous lists of like Kraken, lots of mid-sized units and Spore Mines, just not going to work anymore. But that's always the beauty of Tyranids. We adapt.
Yeah.
Hello. So there was one moment there I just want to comment on that was, I don't know why it was so funny, but it was hilarious to me, which was so you walked away and then zoomed to his thing and just cut to the full background.
Uh-huh.
And then at some moment, a very small, just you far away appeared like in the left side of it,
My
your
camera
full
started tracking.
body, and
Yeah,
started tracking. And it was
that's
just
hilarious.
this tiny
Tiny
Wallace
Wallace. Yes, let's
walking
go.
around. I legitimately have no idea what this is because we've already ranked the Lictor and Death Leaper. So
Um,
give, and
he's
that's
Death
another
Leaper's
Lictor.
buddy. He's Death Leaper's buddy, Joe. He's the one that shows up and brings like extra plates to the party, so he's always super helpful. So let's go ahead and rate him right above Lictor. He's like more helpful than a usual Lictor.
Yeah, he's slightly more helpful than the usual Lictor. I still don't
Yeah.
know who he is. I don't know what his rules are, but
I don't know what that is either, buddy.
he exists and he's on this list, and so he's slightly more helpful than a Lictor.